All right, hi everybody. My name is Mr. Spiegel, and I'm going to be talking about Amendments 16 through 19 and the 21st Amendment to the American Constitution. And so, in general, in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, people seem to be in a mood for change and reform in many areas of society, including political reform. We'll see with these four amendments, plus the 21st, which is not really a progressive or amendment, but I'll explain why that is a little bit later, represent part of a larger change in society. So one of the first things that seemed to happen is in that same time period where there were very wealthy industrial business owners that were becoming massively wealthy, that so much that they thought the government needed to use some of that money to help poor and the needs in society. And one of the solutions was to tax income. And so this was to fund more government spending, which had previously been funded largely by tariffs. And so while taxes get a bad rap and nobody wants to pay them, there is some benefit to that. But obviously, there's always the kind of the debate about how much and what type of taxes. So, like you might make an income in the next couple of years, and a portion of that will come out as federal income tax, and that is because of the 16th Amendment. So, another reform that was to fix the U.S. Senate, which some called the rich man's club. As state legislators at the time got to choose senators for their state before the 17th Amendment. Many saw this as causing kind of corruption, as powerful people would influence state representatives to select someone they wanted. And additionally, they viewed it as undemocratic, right? Because if voters weren't able to choose who was getting elected, and then they thought if they could choose, they would not choose, obviously, corrupt senators. So there we have the passage, right, of the 17th Amendment, directly electing our senators. There's two senators from Ohio, Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown. So another reform might not seem obvious, but it was it was not just an economic one. So the 16th Amendment, right, really focused on money, and the 17th Amendment really focused on democracy and elections. The 18th Amendment is different because people supported prohibition, which is they thought that booze was a social illness. So they thought society would get better if we banned alcohol. So supporters of the 18th Amendment thought that alcohol damaged families, right, with drunken abuse and addicts spending money and the harm on health created to society. So it wasn't good. And so if we could create a dry society, then that would be good, right? And so there's all these pictures of the time of men harming their families because of alcohol, and that, right, that dad is in the bar abandoning his children, and that alcoholism is just a path to destruction where and primarily the focus was men, right? So you can kind of read through what it says as you go through, and they thought that if they banned alcohol, this would be the picture, right? That family and moral life would improve. And so recently, the NFL released some ads. I won't play it because Facebook or YouTube doesn't like it. But after some high-profile domestic abuse cases, with a similar message that prohibition used back in the turn of the century, right? So this is not necessarily always something new. So if you wanted to view the presentation later, you could just hit play and check that out. So prohibition was an effort to ban the consumption, manufacture, sale, transportation of alcohol. And this was enforced by the Volstead Act. And so the 18th Amendment really curbs or tries to curb the consumption of alcohol in America. Sorry. Okay, with the passage of the 18th Amendment, the demand for alcohol actually grew. So this is kind of an unforeseen consequence of prohibition. And so speaking of that, the people who really benefited from prohibition were in fact organized crime. And so gangsters would own speakeasies, which were illegal bars, and they would create distilleries to produce alcohol, and they would bribe those in the criminal justice system, like judges and cops and politicians, and the profits from alcohol actually increased. And so this was a big challenge of mob gang violence and so obviously this is a part of our kind of pop culture of the time, but we can see that this was in fact kind of serious stuff. And I'm sure you've heard of a pretty famous example was the emergence of Al Capone in Chicago. His gang brought in huge amounts of money. So $60 million a year is a huge sum in 1927. And like it says, has a private army. And so violence was really high in the streets of Chicago. And so we can see a pretty famous guy, right? Right. And there's a famous quote, "Don't make the mistake. My kindness for weakness. I am kind to everyone. But when someone is unkind to me, weak is not what you're going to remember about me." And so that is definitely true because an example would be the famous St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So what ends up happening is a rival gang to Al Capone, his gang in Chicago, was headed by Bugs Moran. And essentially what happens is Al Capone's gang, dressed as cops, pulls over the rival gang. They brought them into a building and they ended up murdering them all. And this really brought this sort of violence to the attention of the American public. And this act really shocked people to question, is prohibition really worth it, with the problems that came along with things such as mob violence. So other things that were happening during this time were speakeasies. Sorry, one too many clicks. And so speakeasies appeared all over the nation where people sold bootleg alcohol, which was illegally produced alcohol, right? And so people did not stop drinking even though it was illegal. They just got clever in the ways that they could consume it. So if you want, you can stop the presentation or this video, and you can go to the presentation, and you can watch a real life recording of a speakeasy that still is in existence today. Obviously, consuming alcohol is legal, but the structure that once existed is still there. So another thing that happened in Prohibition was moonshine, right? And so moonshine is illegal liquor, right, rather than beer. And since people made it at home in other secret locations, this could also be harmful to people's health. And so people died because of drinking tainted moonshine. So you can see people produce this in cities and out in the country, in places like the woods, kind of secret locations alike. And moonshine actually still exists today, believe it or not. And some people don't want to pay the taxes that are associated with producing liquor. And it's illegal. And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, otherwise known as the ATF, still exist and try to track these people down. So once again, you could watch this in the presentation. And so alcohol would often be produced in remote areas, but then needed to be transported to cities where people could consume it, right? So there's some evidence being sort of gathered. Sorry, I'll go back for a second. So lots of smugglers, whether it was by seas or through the Great Lakes or from Mexico or Canada, there was lots of transportation of illegal alcohol. So despite the problems created by the 18th Amendment, people termed the Dries still actually supported prohibition. They thought that it would still improve individuals, right, and strengthen families, and it would create a better society and stop diseases in people's lives. So I don't know if that's a strong argument, but there it is. Other people, called the Wets, did not want to ban alcohol. They thought this is a bad idea, right? And that is they thought that it wouldn't stop people from drinking, and it turns everyday people who just want to have a drink into criminals and creates these networks, and has an increased level of violence and corruption in society. So ultimately, in 1933, the 18th Amendment is passed. It's actually the first amendment to repeal another amendment, which was the 18th. So a quick way to remember this is you can not drink when you're 18 legally, right? But you can when you're 21. So the same is true of the amendment numbers. So there we go. Just kidding, right? All right, one other one that I thought we should talk about is this was the idea of giving women the right to vote, right? Giving them full political rights. And this happens in 1920 as a result of the long efforts of suffragists. And these are the term given to women who are fighting for the right to vote. So once again, another movie clip from something called Iron Jawed Angels, which is a really good movie. You can get kind of a feel for what that looks like, at least according to Hollywood. And so guys, here are some other resources. If this quick video didn't necessarily answer all your questions, or you wanted to know more, you could watch each one of these. You could play a Quizlet or a Quiz Is to help you do well.